making it up as we go along. As we go along. Here we go. It's all going to be stand-up material. So, I have a new version, yes, another version of my book. And the way that happened was, the Monkees got back together. And just after the last edition of my book. So the story really wasn't over, to say the least. I thought it was. So I wanted to go back and rewrite my original book, The Monkees' Tale. And as soon as it was released, the Monkees announced the 2011 tour. So I was like, all right. Well, that's kind of good, kind of bad. I was happy that they were touring. I kind of wanted to cover it in my book. And then a lot happened, you guys might have heard, after 2011. So I covered all of that in my new book. And there's new photos. There's a foreword by Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller. And kind of a neat cover, too. Done by a guy named Wayne Schellebacher, who's a really excellent graphic artist. And so if you want a copy of it, I gotta go after this. I gotta leave the Monkees Convention. So if you do want one, let me know right away, or go online and get it, or don't buy it. Whatever you want. It's fine. It's all good. Anyway, why don't I take questions, because maybe I have some answers.
I have a question. Do you feel like there's any particular song from their catalog that should have been featured as a 45 and kind of missed their...
I would have liked to have seen a song off of Headquarters, because if there had been a hit song, then more people would have found out about it. I mean, Headquarters did great. It's a great record. It's certainly one of my favorites, probably one of your favorites. Let's hear it for Headquarters. You know, a couple of things made me want to write the book. And Headquarters, originally, back in when the dinosaurs roamed the earth. You weren't even born. And Headquarters was one of those things that just seemed like, well, there's a story here. You know, they made their own record. I didn't even know that. And then, you know, the movie blew my mind. I was like, this is really wrong. But it's really, there's a story behind it. And on and on. Off of, I think Randy Scousket would have been a great single. It may not have done huge business, but it's a pretty cool song. To say the least. And it was a hit in England. And it would, yeah, that's the answer. Anybody? That's it? Good night and good luck. Joe.
Hey, so
What we got?
what's the most surprising thing you found? What's the most surprising thing you think you found out when you originally wrote the book? When you were doing your research?
Time I wrote the book?
What, no, just the most surprising nugget or anything you found out. Now, what's the most surprising information you found out when you were originally researching the book? Not necessarily about the music, just about any of it.
The most original, you know what it was? It was something that ended up affecting those guys, and I would have had no idea of that. And that was that the producers, Bert and Bob, had intended it had to be the last thing that they were involved in. And so I reported that, because that's what they told me. And it got back to me that the Monkees didn't know that. So that was like, I didn't intentionally do that, you know, but it worked out that way. So I think that's the answer, you know, that I came up with some information that maybe the guys themselves didn't know. I don't know if that is true for all four of them, but that's what I understand. So that was like a flukish thing. The fact that I got an audience with Bert Schneider, especially, was like, I never quite understood why he did it, because he didn't give interviews. And he never gave another interview on the Monkees, and he barely gave an interview ever on the Monkees. He was interviewed for a couple articles. But he had me up to his home, and he lives at the top of Beverly Hills somewhere, and I'm like a kid, and I'm very blown away, just, you know, period. And I was like, what am I doing here? How did I get here? And he saw me, and he was like, you're just a kid. And I had acne and all that stuff. I looked horrible. And he was really engaging person and impressed me a lot, you know, because he had this Oscar was sitting on his desk, and he had a beautiful view of the hills. The whole thing was mind-blowing, and he told me that he was trying to get the show back on cable TV. And at the time, he was saying the USA channel? Is that a channel?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, all right, well, that sounds good. Good idea. And then he called up Bob Rafelson and said, there's a kid here. And then he sent me over to Bob Rafelson's house. So it all happened like in a day. But once I approached the Monkees and said I had talked to Bert and Bob, it was like, whoa, that's all right. That's interesting. You know, so I think that helped give me some credibility. I remember meeting Peter, and he was like, oh, you met Bert? Like, he hadn't talked to Bert in a long time. So it's flukish. And then it came out before the MTV thing, so I don't know why things happen like that, but that's the way it went down.
It was good for your book, at the MTV thing.
It was good for the book. It was good for the book. I wish I'd been paid for all the copies that were sold, but a lot of people say that, right?
Yeah.
That's the old story. Any other questions?
Do you find yourself to be a collector of merchandise from back then?
No, I am not a collector, but some of my best friends are. It's the old joke. Really, some of my best friends are. And there's a guy who couldn't make it, Dwayne. He's a really good friend of mine, otherwise known as Ed Finn, who right from the start, he was giving me VHS copies of the show, things I wouldn't have found that easily. You have to go way back in the Wayback Machine and realize there just wasn't that much information. So a lot of my information was looking on microfilm, if anyone remembers microfilm. And, you know, going through, like, issue by issue, going through old copies of newspapers and magazines. But it was fun. Actually, that was, like, great because you would discover things, you know, like, ah, there it is, you know, 2 E's. You look for a K in 2 E's, you know, it's like scanning pages. And so I had to, like, cobble together all the info I could. Anyway, hopefully that answered the question. Go ahead, ask me a question. Yeah, please. You don't have to, all right. No, I'm not dyeing my hair.
And you said that you decided that it was time you wanted to rewrite the book. What kind of things about it did you want to revisit, and did you want to correct any research? Or did you just feel like, oh,
how about the factual errors? Yeah, no, why did I rewrite the book? Well, first of all, it was a great experience being young and having a book that people, first of all, I never knew that 8 and 10-year-olds were going to read this book. You got to understand that. That seemed very implausible. Like, I was writing the book for my peer group. It ended up being read a lot more by people that were very young, which was uncomfortable when I thought about it later. You know, like, maybe I didn't have to say it that way. But anyway, it was very exciting. It was the best-selling book I was involved with, and then I just had to get away from it because I don't know if you've noticed, but the monkey world is very together. But there's territories, and
there was territorial stuff that happened. And it was just like one quick anecdote. I was on a TV show and I forgot to mention a record label. And I got like a call from a guy who sounded basically like he was from the mob. He was just, somebody was just, you know, having a joke on me. But he was like, why didn't you mention his record label? After I was on a TV show. And I was like, that's weird. That's weird. Like, why do I owe people? And I can't think that fast. Like, I'm supposed to be promoting some record label while I'm on a TV show. You know, I just can't think that way. So I took a lot of years off and stayed away from it. I always loved it. I kept my contacts. I followed it like a fan. And then I finally, you know, I had kids, I grew up, and I just wanted to go back and make it right because there was facts that emerged, and I thought the story actually was still interesting, unlike a lot of bands. I mean, does anyone care about the Jefferson Starship and what they did in the 1980s? Maybe, but you know, people care about what happened after the MTV reunion. So there was a story to tell, and then I was definitely blown away that there was another chapter, you know, many chapters sitting in the last 3 years. So the story is fascinating, and it just keeps sucking me back in. It's like you guys, you know. And I think, by the way, I think the fans are what's driving this now. I don't think, you know, the guys are great, you know, we love the guys. They're the Monkees. But I think it's us, you know, who are now kind of, we're the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the Monkees. Yeah, who needs those guys? Questions?
Anyone else with questions?
Can I ask another?
Yeah.
Certainly. I could probably monopolize your time, but I won't. So I just bought the DVDs, and I know they were made like 10 or 11 years ago. And I was listening to the commentary, and Bob Rafelson is very effusive in his praise for the guys. But Peter, at least then, doesn't have very nice things to say about Bob and Bert. Do you know what's involved in that dynamic at all?
Well, I think it's like they were adopted children who they brought up, and then they dropped them back on the doorstep after raising them. They just cut them off. There was no, Bob and Bert didn't do anything. Now, Bob and Bert, we wouldn't be here if they hadn't made it happen.
Right.
So, hopefully they've come to terms with that. I know that, like, I'm pretty sure Nesmith is really good with Bob. From what I understand, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. It's hard for me to speculate about somebody's relationship, but I think Peter was really hurt by the movie, if I had to guess. You know. But you know, also Bob and Bert were really big deals. They started indie American cinema by making Easy Rider. I mean, it's a dated movie. I don't want to watch Easy Rider again, personally. You know, but that was an important film. It was an independent film, and it introduced a whole other kind of narrative, way of telling American stories. 5 Easy Pieces, same thing. That made Jack Nicholson. They made Jack Nicholson a star. So Bob and Bert were in radical politics. They were like big deals. They used the Monkees to. They always said they wanted to get into movies. So it wasn't like they snuck up on people. This is what they wanted to do. They wanted to make a TV show, make a boatload of money, have a good time, and then start making original American films with unknown people, just like they used unknown people in the Monkees, like James Frawley, and you know, they hired young talent that wasn't proven, and you know, except for maybe Coffin and King, and through Don Kirshner, this was like really like not an establishment type of thing, except for Bert using his little family connections. Wouldn't we all like that? Family connection like that. Next. Oh, that's nobody. Anybody else? Oh, go ahead.
you said that this was the Monkees Tale was the most successful book that you were involved in. So, what other topics did you write on? And was the Monkees Tale the first one you did, or
The Monkees Tale was the first book I ever did. It was published by a roguish fellow who put out like dirty comics. If you know Art Crumb, we shared a book party because Ron wouldn't pay for 2 book parties, and that was cool because I didn't, they made a movie about Art Crumb.
yeah?
What did I know? But so the Monkees Tale was my first book, but after that experience, I decided I would publish my own book because there was a little problem getting paid. So the next book was I met a photographer on the Monkees Tale project who took a picture of Mickey Dolenz at Monterey Pop. Just an amazing photographer. Even Henry Diltz would tell you this guy is the guy. So I've talked to Henry about him a lot. It's a guy named Jim Marshall. You ever see the Johnny Cash picture? He's flipping the bird? That's Jim Marshall, or the Allman Brothers cover. Jim Marshall did a ton of stuff. And he was like a sharpshooter. He was like a guy who was amazing. Anyway, he took this picture of Mickey at Monterey. I used it in the Monkees Tale. And he lived in San Francisco a couple of blocks away. He was a little down on his luck. And this kid, still a kid back then, said you want to do a book on the Beatles' last concert? Because he was the sole photographer with access to the Beatles. And so my next book was about the Beatles' last concert. It's kind of funny because it's 1966. It's all that was the year for me, 1966. And what's really cool is I still own that title. And Paul McCartney is talking about playing the last show at Candlestick Park, where the last concert was. So I might be able to finally unload the last 300 copies I have of this book.
Why didn't you bring him here?
Somebody just asked me why didn't I bring him here, because this is a Monkees show.
The guy over there selling only a Beatles book.
Yeah, I know that.
I gotta say, it was not a bad idea, but you don't have to make every dollar that you can.
Eric, I have a question. The book we just mentioned right now, will you put that out as an e-book?
Which one? The Marshall book?
Yeah.
I am dealing with the Marshall estate now, and can't say much more than that. Jim Marshall was a crazy guy. I mean, everybody who knew him knew he was crazy. Kind of dangerous crazy. And, but fun danger. He was a really crazy guy. And his estate is carrying on his legacy. Anybody else?
Any other questions, guys? Oh, we got one over here?
Yeah.
Stand up. We can't see you.
Sorry, so, it was kind of, from my understanding, Mike was very clear from the beginning that he wanted to have more control. And then there was that infamous episode of him putting his fist through the wall.
Yeah.
In your opinion, is that, from that early incident, is that kind of a beginning to the end? Or was there some other moment that escalated it and made it go further on?
I think it was definitely a big moment when Mike put his fist through the wall. That's a great image in your mind of that happening. It's pretty violent, but he made his point clear. And I think it's the end of the beginning. But I think because Nesbitt did what he did, I think that's one of the reasons we're all still interested, because he really forced their hand. I think Peter wanted to do it equally as badly. I don't think Peter had the force of will, or, for many reasons maybe, would not have put his fist through the wall. He doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But because Nesbitt did that, and they made their own music, it crossed the line between reality and fantasy, which is where I think the producers wanted it to go, but the money people didn't. Well, that's a great story. It's kind of a timeless story. And I think that's one reason why, it endures. If they hadn't made that play for creative control, it still would be really great. But it would be like, the Beatles only put out A Hard Day's Night.
Yeah, I think we got time for one more question. So, right there, one more, last one.
Separate different things over the years about Nicholson and Schneider, whether they came up with the idea for the show before a Hard Day's Night,
Yeah.
and then of course other things were saying afterwards, and then Hard Day's Night
Yeah,
was easy.
who came up with the idea and when? Bob Rafelson, bless, good old Bob, wherever he's been asking probably, I think. He doesn't really come out for these things. It's too bad. We would all be, I think it would be great to have Bob Rafelson here. Here's a guy who can answer some questions for us. But Bob always blew a lot of hot smoke about, like, I don't really owe the Beatles any success because I had this idea before the Beatles. Well, let's just call it bullshit on that. I mean, come on. I'm not having it. And I really like, and I really admire Bob's accomplishments. He doesn't seem like a celebrity. I think Bob is like an artist. And so he probably, I think he has a healthy ego. And it might be hard for him to say the Beatles started this. But Bert had told me directly, we owe it all to the Beatles. I mean, come on. Let's be real here. There would have been, that would be crazy. Like Bob would have sold a series about called the Monkees if the Beatles hadn't happened. I don't think so. But let him have his way.
Okay,
Right.
last words, Eric?
Yeah, I'll see you guys at the 50th anniversary. Let's all be here. Eat your dreams. And if you do want the book, I'm gonna be there for like 5 minutes and I gotta actually go. I got a commitment to go, but it's really been great to talk to you guys. Thanks for coming early because I was scheduled for later. It's great to see all these faces. It's all good. I hope you guys had a great time.
Give it up for Eric Lefkowitz. Okay. Okay, guys.